In the first quarter of 2026, the GTA recorded its worst quarter for new condo sales in 35 years. 246 units sold in 3 months. Meanwhile, 29,000 condos are completing this year alone, built for buyers who no longer exist, at prices the market has not seen in years. The ones who stayed are paying $4,200 a month for a unit they cannot sell. Today, I will show you exactly how Toronto's condo market got here. On April 21, 2026, Urban Nation released their first quarter market report. Real estate agents, developers, and mortgage brokers across Toronto read the same line at the same time. Zero. Not a single new condo project launched in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area in the first quarter of 2026. Not one groundbreaking, not one sales center opening. For the first time in at least 30 years, the pipeline went completely dark. That number did not arrive in isolation. It followed 2025, a year in which new condo sales across the Greater Toronto area totaled 1,599 units for the entire year, the lowest annual figure since 1991, down 91% below the 10-year average and down 95% from 2021 levels. In 2021, over 29,000 new condos sold in the Greater Toronto area. In 2025, fewer than 1,600. In the first quarter of 2026, 246. The direction of that line is not ambiguous. At the same time, the completions kept arriving. Urban Nation tracked nearly 30,000 condo completions in 2025, near the all-time record set the year before. Back-to-back record completion years, both arriving into a market where demand had already collapsed. The result? As of the first quarter of 2025, Urbanation reported approximately 23,918 unsold new condo units sitting across the GTHA, near an all-time record for unsold inventory. By the time 2026 completions begin hitting the market, that number will grow further. The 29,000 units in the title of today's video is not a single static number. It is a pipeline arriving in real time into a market with almost no one to absorb it. That is not a correction. That is a structural mismatch between supply and demand at a scale this city has not experienced in living memory. To understand why 29,000 units have no buyers, you need to go back to the logic that built them. Because the people who bought these units did not make irrational decisions in the context that existed at the time. In 2020 and 2021, Toronto's pre-construction condo market was operating on a logic that had been proven correct for over a decade. Buy at pre-construction pricing. The unit appreciates during the 2 to 4 year build window. At closing, sell through assignment or close and rent at a profit. Interest rates were near zero. The Bank of Canada had told Canadians explicitly that rates would stay low for a long time, and pre-construction condos were selling at $1,689 per square foot at the peak in Q3 2022. Investors made up over 70% of pre-construction buyers at that time. Then in March 2022, the Bank of Canada started hiking rates. By the time they stopped, the overnight rate had gone from 0.25% to 5% in less than 18 months. Borrowing costs more than doubled. The entire financial model collapsed under the weight of rates that nobody in the sales center had modeled. The buildings, however, kept rising. Construction does not stop because rates go up. The cranes that were already in the air in 2022 stayed up through 2023 and 2024, and into 2025 and 2026. And when those buildings completed, the buyers who had signed at peak prices received their closing notices. According to CMHC data, Toronto condo prices fell 13.4% from their 2022 peak. New condo price per square foot dropped from $1,689 in the third quarter of 2022 to around $1,123 per square foot by late 2025, a decline of over 33% on new units alone. A buyer who locked in at $700,000 in 2021 was being asked to close on a unit the bank would only mortgage at $520,000. The buyer owned that gap in cash. Most did not have it. Approximately 10% of all pre-sold condos that registered in 2025 were taken back by developers after buyers failed to close. That is roughly 3,000 units in a single year returned to developer inventory, relisted into a market already drowning in supply and adding further downward pressure to a floor that was already moving. The federal government introduced Bill C-4 in March 2026, the Making Life More Affordable for Canadians Act. The GST was fully eliminated on new homes up to $1 million. Ontario followed with the provincial portion. Stack both rebates, and total savings can reach up to $130,000 on qualifying homes. Politicians celebrated. Realtors sent newsletters. The market did not move. Here is why. Even after the full rebate is applied, the gap between what developers are asking for new condos and what resale units are actually selling for still sits at approximately 20%. Before the rebate, it was 38%. The rebate helped. It did not close the gap, and first-time buyers noticed. Developers are asking around $1,189 per square foot for unsold new units. Resale condos in comparable buildings are selling at $859 per square foot. That is a 28% premium for new. After the rebate, call it 20%. The question a first-time buyer is asking is simple. Why am I paying more for new when I can buy the same building for less, with no construction risk and no closing date uncertainty? There is no good answer, and the market is reflecting it. But the price gap is not the only reason buyers are sitting out. The units being completed are also the wrong units. According to a Bank of Canada analysis from February 2026, roughly 60% of new condo units coming onto the GTA market are micro units, 3 rooms or fewer. But only about 30% of new households are the type that would typically purchase a unit that small. These units were designed for investors who would rent them to international students and young transient workers in a market where vacancy was under 1% and tenants had almost no options. Canada went from welcoming 1.4 million newcomers in 2023 to under 300,000 between late 2024 and mid-2025. That rental demand evaporated almost overnight. The investor who would have bought the unit to rent it out has exited the market. The end-user buyer walks through a 450 square foot studio and says they cannot raise a family in it. The first-time buyer doing the math chooses to rent and wait. As of the end of the first quarter of 2026, 4,295 brand-new completed condos sat finished, empty, and unsold across the GTA, more than double the number from 1 year earlier. There are another 8,629 unsold units still under construction, set to hit the market in the next 2 years. At the current pace of sales, Urban Nation calculated 92 months of supply for completed new condos. That is nearly 8 years of inventory at today's demand levels. 8 years. For the buyers who did close, who found the cash, absorbed the appraisal gap, or had no legal alternative, the closing date was not the end of the problem. It was the beginning of a different one. According to a CIBC and Urban Nation report, 82% of new condo investors with a mortgage in the first half of 2024 were cash flow negative. Not breaking even, not marginally negative. The majority. By 2026, with rates still elevated and rents declining as thousands of new units flooded the rental market simultaneously, that number has not improved. Here is what the monthly math looks like on a unit purchased at $712,000 in 2021 and closed in 2024. Mortgage payment at current rates, approximately $3,400 per month. Maintenance fee on a 635 square foot unit, between $412 and $540 per month. Property tax, roughly $280 per month. Total monthly carrying cost, over $4,200. The average asking rent for a one-bedroom condo in the GTA as of early 2026, around $2,100 per month. That unit is generating a monthly loss of over $2,000 before accounting for vacancy, repairs, or property management. Carrying costs for condo investors have risen 24% since 2022. Rents have grown 15% over the same period. Every month that gap widens, the decision to keep holding becomes harder to justify. And for investors approaching mortgage renewal, those who locked in 5-year fixed terms at rates below 2%, the payment shock is arriving now. Bank of Canada data shows 5-year fixed borrowers renewing in 2026 are facing average payment increases of roughly 20%. At the higher end, some variable rate holders are seeing increases exceeding 40%. A 20% increase on a monthly payment that was already generating a $2,000 loss is not a rounding error. It is the moment an owner decides to list. Condo inventory across the Greater Toronto Area has been at decade highs. The units hitting the market are not owner-occupied homes being sold for life cycle reasons. They are investment units being offloaded by owners who have decided that the monthly loss is no longer worth absorbing. 3 groups are driving the surge. The first is investors who closed on pre-construction units at 2021 and 2022 prices and have been holding through the downturn. Their mortgage terms are renewing. Their rental income does not cover their carrying costs. Their unit is worth less than they paid, which means they cannot refinance into a better position. Selling at a loss now stops the monthly bleeding. Waiting requires capital, which they are running out of. The second is end-user buyers who closed at peak prices and find themselves unable to move without absorbing a 6-figure loss. They are not listing aggressively because they need somewhere to live. But every major life decision runs into the same wall. The third group is buyers at mortgage renewal who discover their unit has lost 15 to 25% of its value. Some cannot resolve the loan-to-value conversation with their lender. The unit goes on the market. Every unit that lists adds supply. More supply extends the time other units sit unsold. Longer days on market increases carrying costs for sellers. More carrying cost pressure pushes more owners toward listing. The loop reinforces itself. This is not a cycle that self-corrects quickly. The only thing that breaks it is demand returning. And demand cannot return at the rate needed until the price gap between new and resale closes, or until the supply wave ends. Here is the part of this story that most coverage misses entirely. The supply wave hitting the market today will end. The pipeline behind it is almost empty. In 2025, new condo starts in the Greater Toronto Area hit their lowest level since the 1990s. Only 3,272 units broke ground across the entire region for the full year, an 88% decline over 3 years. Urban Nation projects completions will fall from roughly 30,000 per year today down to approximately 2,000 units by 2029. That is a 93% reduction in new supply arriving into a city that still adds 50,000 to 70,000 new residents every year. The 30,000 units completing today, that wave eventually stops. When it does, and with almost nothing behind it, the supply dynamic reverses. Rental vacancy tightens, rents recover. Investors who held through the downturn find themselves in buildings where income is rising and values are stabilizing. The owners who sold at the bottom will have exited at the worst possible moment. Sean Hildebrand, president of Urban Nation, said in early 2026 that it is probably safe to say the market has hit the bottom. That is not a guarantee, but it is a signal from someone who tracks this data professionally that the floor may already be behind us. The question is not whether Toronto's condo market recovers. The supply math makes recovery essentially inevitable. The question is whether you can hold long enough to be on the right side of it when it does. If you found this interesting, check out this video here.